in a program called the Firewise USA program. It's a framework a national framework. It's administered out of the National Fire Protection Association in Denver. We've adopted this as a training program to help homeowners focus on the right things around their homes, come up with better ways to protect their communities. It's a recognition program essentially for your participation in this that provides some really distinct benefits. The big one is that once you've gone through this really simple process that I'm going to walk your boards through, you'll receive some education. Tonight is your first of hopefully many education events in the community. You're going to do some work around your properties. You're already engaged in that. Canyon Village has paid for goat grazing near the buildings. Meadowlands homeowners are working on organizing a chipper day. You're going to do things like that every year from now on out, as long as you choose to live in a place that's exposed to wildfires. You're going to go through this process, and what you're going to get in return is a safer community. You're going to be less likely to burn during a big fire. You're going to get insurance discounts from your homeowners' insurers. You're going to get access to insurance when other communities can't get insurance. We're seeing a growing trend of insurers backing out of the market in California. We have confirmation from the State Insurance Commission in California that every insurance carrier in California considers the fact that you do or don't live within the boundaries of a Firewise community when they're looking at writing new policies and canceling existing policies. So there's some real direct benefits to you. Some of the insurers provide discounts. USAA and CSAA both provide direct discounts on your homeowners policies. So you get a lot of questions from people, what am I going to get out of this? That's something direct. And the fact that you're probably, at least anecdotally, less likely to have your policy canceled is a good thing, because since the beginning of this year at Fire Safe Marin, we've been contacted 400 times by homeowners in Marin who've had their policies canceled. Last year, in all of 2018, which, mind you, was immediately following the North Bay fires, we had 200 contacts in the full year. So right now, we're at a pace where about 4 times more cancellations right now than we were at the same period last year. This is a serious problem. We need homeowners insurance. So that's all the intro. What I really want to focus on, at least initially, is your personal safety. When these guys respond to any kind of a fire, it doesn't matter if it's a house fire, like the one that we had at Canyon Village just last year, a wildfire, their first priority is always to protect lives. Your life, your safety, your family's safety is most important. Your property, your belongings come second. The environment comes last, and it's not because we don't care about the environment, it's because wildfires don't really typically harm the environment, particularly. The environment here depends on wildfire. The plants and animals actually need wildfire. So their priority is protecting your life. That needs to be your priority too. And what we've seen, especially in the last 9 months, it was 9 months ago that the campfire burned in Paradise. We've seen sort of a whole mythology develop around the pictures that you all saw in the media. How many of you saw the photographs of the cars burned up on the side of the road, the school bus burned up on the side of the road? You see those? Yeah. So one of those pictures, the one that was on the front page of the Chronicle, won the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. Fantastic photo, terrifying photo of a huge row of cars. There's about 30 cars burned up on the side of the road in that picture. You heard that 88 people died during that fire. How many of the people who died, of the 88, do you think died in those cars that burned up, the huge, miles-long vacuum cars? 3? None? Nobody died in those cars. Those cars had been abandoned by people who panicked when they were stuck in traffic. You know, we've all confronted traffic, sometimes pretty bad traffic, just trying to get to Fairfax in the morning when school's in. It's hard for us to imagine what it must be like to be a resident evacuating your own community when your house is on fire, your community's on fire, there's fire on both sides of the road, and you're stuck in traffic. I'm sure it was terrifying for those people. I'm not criticizing them, but they made a horrible mistake by getting out of their cars. And so I want to talk to you about what evacuation preparedness should look like, how you would evacuate this particular community during a wildfire, what you need to do in advance to be ready to evacuate, and just questions. You're welcome to ask questions at any point, interrupt me. I might say, hold on a second, because I'll probably be getting, I kind of have a script here. I'll get to the point to answer some of your questions, but if you think of something, ask. I'm going to pass these around. Everybody would take one of these. This is a wildfire evacuation checklist that we've published kind of in one form or another for probably 20 years. It's grown a lot in the last 2 years. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've got a growing list of frequently asked questions from people who come to us with concerns, questions about preparing to evacuate. One of the biggest changes in evacuation preparedness and messaging in Marin is the adoption of something called Alert Marin. This was adopted 4 years ago. Is anybody here registered for Alert Marin? Is anybody here not sure what Alert Marin is, or not sure if you're registered? No.
Is it the same as Nixle?
Is anybody here? No. Is anybody here registered for Nixle? So we usually find that more people are registered for Nixle than Alert Marin. Nixle and Alert Marin are somewhat related. I rarely even mention this. They're owned by the same company, but they do different things. They have different purposes. They're not the same thing, and registering for one does not mean you're registered for the other. Alert Marin is the emergency notification system that's been adopted by every public safety agency in Marin County. This is how we will alert you when there is an emergency that's going to impact your home address, and there's an action that you need to take at your home address. It is critical that you register. You need to self-register for this. You need to go online and register at alertmarin.org. And you're going to register your home address and every phone number and every contact method you have. Email, cell phones, your home phones. You register all of those phone numbers. When you go through this process, you're going to have an opportunity to select up to 5 other addresses. So if you have a family member, it might be a child, it might be your parents, just a friend that you're concerned about, maybe a friend who's got mobility issues that lives in a different part of town that you're worried about how they're going to get out during a wildfire. You can register their address too, and you'll be notified if there's an emergency at their address. This is really important. Pardon? .org. And it's right on the top here in the green area, right across the top. It's also on this brochure. I'm going to pass these out too. We'll get those started. Alert Marin is how we're going to notify you when you need to take an action at your house. But sometimes we just need to get you information that's not life-threatening information. We do use Nixle for that. Nixle is almost all of you raise your hands for that. You know what it is. Nixle is an information service that any government agency, including the post office and the sanitary district, can access, the school district, and they send out pretty frequent messages through Nixle. They'll tell you when the school bus is running late sometimes, when the roads are going to be shut down because of work on the sewer lines. You get a lot of information. It's useful information, but there's something we're starting to call Nixle fatigue. People get so many messages on Nixle. Most of them don't really have anything to do with them, so they unsubscribe. The reason you get a lot of messages that don't have to do with you is we can only use Nixle to send out information to an entire zip code. We only have your phone number, we can only send out text messages, and we can only associate it with a zip code. So if something's happening in 94930, you get a message. Even if it's a road closure on Cascade Drive, you're not even sure where that is, you're going to get a message about it. Alert Marin's not like that. When you get a message on Alert Marin, it means there's a life-threatening emergency at your home address right now, and you need to take action immediately. So you're not going to get bombarded by messages. It's secure. You don't need to worry about sharing your information, and we need you to self-register. It's really important. We also use other information sources. We use social media and Twitter. I don't use social media or Twitter, but many of us do. We do try to duplicate informational messages through social media. And during an evacuation, during a life-threatening emergency, we're working with everybody from the National Weather Service, who sends out radio signals about the weather through weather radios you can buy at Radio Shack or Amazon. We're working with local TV and radio stations so that they will repeat information. KGO and KCBS, two of the best radio stations for this part of Marin. You can get them. They're printed on the back of this form. Apologize for the small type. We put a lot of information in there. So we do use other information sources. Through Alert Marin, you're going to get one of 3 messages when there is an emergency that requires you to do something at your address. We're either going to tell you that there is an evacuation order issued for your home address. There's a description in the red area here that tells you what an evacuation order is, but trust me, you don't need to take notes, you don't need to write it down. We're going to repeat this message when we call you. Alert Marin can send you a text message, it can call you with a voice message, or it can send you an email. We'll try all 3 until you respond to one of those. So we'll keep calling you, we'll keep emailing you, we'll keep sending you text messages until you reply and acknowledge that you've received it. Really important. If we tell you that there is an evacuation order for your home address, that means, and we're going to follow up with a description of this, you need to leave immediately. You need to protect only yourself. You're going to do a couple things related to how you dress. You're going to gather your kids and your pets and your go bag, which is listed on the back here, bottom of the back side. You're going to take the go bag. Your homework tonight is to go home and put this go kit together. You're going to take your children, your pets, your neighbor, if your neighbor needs help, and you're going to get in your car and you're going to leave. You're going to head towards Highway 101 every time. Second message that we might send you is an evacuation warning. That's when we think you have some extra time. We think you may have up to 2 hours. We don't necessarily want you to wait 2 hours, but we think you have enough time to gather a few more of your belongings and go through this full checklist on the front of this. This is a real checklist that we think you should use during an emergency. The other part of your homework at some point is to go home and read every item on this checklist. We don't have enough time tonight for me to go through everything on here, but every one of them is a real thing that you need to think about during an evacuation. And you're going to learn a lot about the different things that could get you in trouble when a wildfire is approaching. So this is a real checklist. You'll go through that. I'm going to touch on a couple key points. When it comes time to evacuate because a wildfire is approaching, we want you to dress head to toe, long sleeves, cotton or wool clothing. You're dressing like you're going out for winter, even if it's 100 degrees out. We want you to cover all of your skin, a floppy cotton hat. I know at least one person in the room, my mother's back there, who saw the video on TV of the woman evacuating the fire in Paradise. Her hair was on fire, running down the road. Anybody see that? There were lots of images like that. Terrifying, horrible. That's why we want you to put a floppy cotton hat on your head. Keep embers from falling on your hair and lighting your hair on fire. These are outlier scenarios. I'm hopeful that we all live our lives and this fire doesn't hit our community, but it can, and this is a simple way to protect yourself. You need to protect your eyes. You need to think about your eyes with full coverage goggles that wrap around. You can go to Fairfax Lumber and get goggles for about $5 that will go over your eyeglasses if you wear glasses. Get those goggles, full coverage on the side. The number one injury for firefighters fighting wildfires are eye injuries. They get one speck of dust in their eyes, and these firefighters can't continue to fight the fire until they get it out. Sometimes they got to go to the emergency room to have it flushed out. They have that option. If you're trying to evacuate during a wildfire and you get one speck of dust in your eye, it can cost you your life. So goggles are more important than you might think. We want you to protect your airway, a dust mask, an N95 dust mask. It's on the shelf at the hardware store. It's like $1. That's enough to protect your airway from particulates, from the particles and smoke, the dust, the embers. We want you to cover your face and your skin, your ears, anything that's exposed, your neck with like a cotton bandana or a wool scarf. We want you to think about your hands and your feet. You got to wear heavy shoes, no open-toe shoes. You're evacuating a wildfire, and it's a small possibility, but there is always that chance that you might have to get out of your car. I'm going to talk to you about how to make that decision in a minute. But I want you wearing heavy shoes, boots, wool socks, long pants. Cotton jeans are the best thing you can wear. You need to protect your hands. Just leather gardening gloves, really important. You're going to protect your hands. If you're evacuating and there's an obstruction in the road, and this has happened over and over again, a little less likely because I'm going to explain to you why you guys are one of the best places for evacuating in the valley. But on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, if something burning fell in front of your car into the roadway and you had to move it to continue evacuating, if you've got leather gardening gloves on, you can step out and move a hot object out of the road. There were people who weren't able to or who seriously burned their hands trying to move things like logs and wood that had fallen into the road and was burning in front of them. Gloves would have saved them. So we get a ton of questions. It goes back to the video footage, the photos you saw of the cars. We're getting a ton of questions from people. Should I evacuate by foot? Should I evacuate by bicycle? How should I evacuate? Should I drive towards West Marin? Should I drive towards Highway 101? How do you make the decision to do that? In your case, what I tell everybody, and this is a really solid rule of thumb, you're going to evacuate in the direction that you go to the grocery store. You're going to evacuate by car every time. Almost no exceptions to this. You're going towards the grocery store. There are no I live in Woodacre. I know there's no grocery stores out that way. So you're headed towards Highway 101 on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, regardless of the traffic that you see. You don't need to worry about traffic. We're concerned about people who live in the hillsides, who live up on the slopes around us. Everybody in this community, you're fortunate to live at the valley floor already. You live at the lowest point in the valley. We want everybody to get to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. It's a 2-lane road with a bike path. It's paved. Asphalt doesn't burn. There is not a tremendous amount of vegetation near the road. It can hold, Sir Francis Drake Boulevard can hold tens of thousands of cars. You're going to be in traffic. I wish I could tell you that law enforcement's going to be able to move all the cars off of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. They're not going to be able to. They're going to do a good job. They're going to move a lot of cars down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. They will be at intersections waving cars through. You're not going to have to wait for lights. We want you to evacuate orderly. One of the biggest issues that we saw in Paradise was people passing over double yellow lines in blinding smoke conditions while fire engines were coming towards them, and then panic. People panicked when they were stuck in traffic. It's this natural feeling. Nobody likes being stuck in traffic. They were caught in traffic. The cars were barely moving, and they got out. They abandoned their cars in the road, and they fled on foot. That's what led to the woman whose hair was on fire in the famous video footage. She got out of her car and she ran for it. A nearly fatal mistake. During the Paradise Fire, over 100,000 people evacuated the communities around Paradise. 88 people died. 79 of those people died in their homes. They didn't evacuate at all. I can't explain why, a variety of reasons. Many of those people probably never got a message. They may have been asleep. This fire struck many of those houses between 7 and 8 in the morning. We may never know. Many of them probably had mobility issues. The average age of the people who died in the fire was 76 years old. Only one person under 50 died. What that tells us is there's a community of people who are vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Some of these people needed hearing aids, couldn't hear the phone ringing when the messages went out through their system, which was like Alert Marin. Some of the people may not have had a phone ringing at all because the power was out in their community. Some of the people might not have been able to evacuate because they had a mobility issue. And that can affect somebody who's 88 years old or somebody who's 18 years old. You may have the strongest, youngest athlete on the football team who just had knee surgery and is out of service. They're not able to evacuate themselves. This is one of the reasons that the community building that we're trying to do is so important. The fire department is going to have their hands full during a fire. These are your 2 firefighters on 1 fire engine in the town of Fairfax right now. There's a whole discussion we could have about why we only have 2 firefighters on the fire engine here, but if we had 3 or 4 firefighters, it's not going to make a tremendous difference. They're not going to be able to rescue everybody in this room. They're gonna be trying to fight that fire. They're gonna be working really hard. They're trained, they know what to do, but we don't have the resources to rescue everybody that needs rescue. We're counting on you to know who needs help in your community. Canyon Village, you've gotta knock on your doors. You've gotta know your neighbors. Glen Drive, Shemron Court, Meadowlands, you gotta know your neighbors. You need to know who needs help. The best thing we can do to alleviate traffic on Sir Francis Drake when we're trying to evacuate is not hire more police officers. It's not build a 6-lane freeway to Highway 101. Nobody wants that. It's to pack as many people into cars. There shouldn't be an empty seat in a car leading out of town. Take your neighbors, pick up your neighbors. Did anybody go to the May 4th Wildfire Forum at the Embassy Suites that we held? We had a great speaker on May 4th at the Embassy Suites. So she's a personal friend of mine, family friend, who evacuated Paradise. She lost her home. She and her husband made a decision. She talked about her decision-making process. They made a decision to take both cars. They didn't want to lose a car. They got into both cars. They started to evacuate. At the first intersection they got to, there was a traffic jam. They were separated. Her husband was ahead of her. 15 minutes into the evacuation, she looked down and realized her car was on empty. The light was on. She was about to run out of fuel. She did run out of fuel. You need to take the car that's most capable of getting you out of town. That might be the one that's got high ground clearance. If you've got an SUV in the garage, take that one, unless it's on empty. You also need to be able to get yourself out of town. So you may have to make a decision if you've got 2 cars about which one is best capable of getting you out of town. Simple decisions like that can make a big difference for you. We want you to get on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, head towards Highway 101. I can't tell you necessarily right now exactly where you're going. We may give you information when we call you with Alert Marin to tell you to head towards an evacuation center that's being opened up at the Marin Civic Center. That's the most likely scenario. That's our primary evacuation center for a fire in this community. There is a chance it would be impacted, or there could be other things happening there, or other reasons we wouldn't choose the Marin Civic Center. We might give you instructions. You may have to wait till you get to Highway 101 and take directions from a highway patrolman at the intersection to tell you which way to go. You should be listening to the news radio stations that are listed back here while you're evacuating for additional information. We'll be forwarding information to them. I can't guarantee you that we're going to be able to give you any messages over your cell phones because we're concerned about cell towers being able to transmit when there's a fire impacting them, when power outages are impacting them. AM, FM radio with transmitters that come from San Francisco may be our best communication tool. We're trying to get the word out in the community about that. KCBS, KGO are our 2 go-to choices. I would expect every radio station in the Bay Area will be mirroring the information that we're pushing out. So, yeah.
If we have family in another town that is not impacted by the fire and we don't want to stay on Sir Francis Drake and to 101,
Yes.
are we going to be allowed to get off 101 to make a turn on to Drake at the hub?
I can't tell you for sure what you'll be allowed to do. It depends on where the fire is.
It's in this area.
But yeah, if it's in this area, so this is an important point, and I think I should probably make this early on when I talk to people. The fire department, these guys, they're going to be capable of putting out 99.99% of the fires that start in our community. Most evacuations are going to be for a very small area, mostly to give firefighters room to work. We may evacuate you, and we've done this year for neighborhoods in Marin. We've had 10 wildfires in the last 2 weeks in Marin. Small fires that affected only a few homes. We've evacuated a handful of homes. The messages that went out primarily didn't go out by Alert Marin. They came from a knock on the door from a police officer, usually saying, there's a fire in your neighborhood. We'd like you to evacuate now. We're going to have aircraft flying in your neighborhood. We're going to have fire engines working here. Although we don't think that your home's going to burn, the firefighters are going to save it, but we'd like you to leave for your safety. That's what most evacuations are going to look like. What we're talking about right now is a larger scale event. Fire, maybe on the scale of something like the Camp Fire, in all likelihood something a little less than that, although that is something that could happen in Marin. The kinds of fires that where potentially tens of thousands of people are evacuated. If that's the case, if we're talking about a scenario like the Camp Fire, you're not going to your friend's house in San Anselmo. Probably not anywhere in the Ross Valley. We're gonna be moving everybody we can out of the Ross Valley. You probably have to go farther than that. Exactly where, I can't tell you. It's gonna be dependent on where the fire starts and where it's burning to. Important to keep in mind, one of the things that can help you predict when these fires are coming is the weather forecast. The National Weather Service issues something called a red flag warning. Has everybody heard of that? Has anybody not heard of a red flag warning? This is a weather warning. It's no different than a flash flood warning or a tornado warning. When the National Weather Service uses the word warning, they mean it. It's serious. I get phone calls every time there's a red flag warning from people who say, would you stop giving out these red flag warnings? You're just scaring people. Stop it. We don't have anything to do with it. It's not the fire department. It's not Fire Safe Marin. We send out messages. We alert the community. We send out a message over Nixle because that's how we send out information. Doesn't mean you need to evacuate. It means you need information. You've signed up. We're all signed up for Nixle. That's how we're going to alert you to a red flag warning. The Marin Independent Journal runs the red flag warning. Now they put it on their homepage. They run it on the weather page. Every news and radio station in the Bay Area is alert to this. They're pushing it out. Monitor the weather. These usually happen in September and October. Historically, those are the months when we see red flag warnings. In 2017, we had a red flag warning on December 17th. It's the only one we've ever seen in Northern California in the month of December. In 2018, we had one on the 4th of May. It's the earliest we've ever seen one in California on the 4th. We've never had one that early in May before. This is because the climate is changing. We're seeing red flag warnings, these types of weather conditions at times of year we never saw them before. Our fire season today is 84 days longer than it was in 1970. We're seeing fires burn like the Thomas Fire burned after the North Bay fires. Was the largest fire in California history. It burned in the month of December in Southern California. That record, the largest fire in California history, only lasted 6 months until the Mendocino Complex fires 50 miles north of here broke that record, shattered it. They burned 500,000 acres. We're seeing weather conditions that we've never seen before. We're seeing those weather conditions earlier and later. So a lot of what I learned growing up fighting fires has changed. It's difficult for us to know what the future's going to be like, but I can tell you that every time I see the media say that this is the new normal, I roll my eyes because it's not the new normal. We're at one state right now and things are only getting worse. We have every reason to believe that fire season is going to be longer in 10 years. I have every reason to think that we're going to continue to see red flag warnings in December and maybe in January someday. These are critical things. The beauty of you being able to respond to a red flag warning is that they come out typically 72 hours before the winds hit your community. They're always related to winds, strong winds, and low humidities. It's wind that comes from the Great Basin, like as far away as Salt Lake City, blows over the desert, comes over the mountains. By the time it reaches us, the winds are blowing usually 30 to 50 miles an hour, sometimes 75 miles an hour like we saw in Sonoma and Napa in the Oakland Hills in 1991. Those winds are what are driving these huge fires. Every catastrophic fire we've seen in California in the last 30 years has been under those wind conditions. We call them Diablo winds here because they're coming in the direction of Mount Diablo. In Southern California, they call them Santa Ana winds. You hear more about Santa Ana winds because they're more common. Historically, in the last 3 years, since 2015, we've seen more days of these wind conditions in Northern California than Southern California has seen the Santa Ana winds. That's never happened before. So it's just something for us to all be aware of. We're going to have to learn to live with this issue, the wildfires.
I have a question. So those Diablo winds have their time period when those particular winds has increased, like the fire season itself. In other words, I've always thought that Diablo winds happen in the fall, like September, October.
Historically, that's when they happen, September, October.
So is that window of those particular winds
Yep.
increased as well?
Yes, from
Into
May, in
August?
2017, it was from May until December.
Oh, those
particular winds.
Okay.
Yep, those are the conditions that drive a red flag warning. It's when we get a red flag warning, you can count on it being related to Diablo
Oh, I
winds.
see, it's always,
Yeah.
okay.
So significantly longer. September and October are the months when we've historically seen wildfires in Marin. In this valley, 1923, fires started in Nevada, right near where Highway 101 is now. It was just a dirt road in 1923. About a quarter mile from the IJ building on the Pacheco Valley. You know where that is? It's a long ways from here. That fire started on September 17th, 1923, under Diablo wind conditions. Somebody was burning trash. That was how you got rid of your trash in 1923. That fire burned 50,000 acres, almost exactly the size of the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa in 2017. The fire was here, burning over this clubhouse the next morning. It burned through this valley here. It burned through Lucas Valley. It burned through Marinwood. It burned up and over the hill into Sleepy Hollow. It burned through Nicasio. It burned through the San Geronimo Valley, Lagunitas, San Geronimo, Woodacre. The San Geronimo Valley was destroyed. There were 5 houses left standing after this fire. It burned through the Cascades in Fairfax, up and over Mount Tam, and it went out when it hit the ocean at Bolinas. 50,000 acre fire. Took almost 36 hours to reach Bolinas, but it did it, with strong northeast winds, Diablo winds. That same day, the Oakland-Berkeley Hills were burning. They called it the Great Fire in the Oakland-Berkeley Hills. Our fire in Marin, which destroyed a huge part of Marin, it's the biggest fire we know of in Marin history, was almost forgotten because fire burned 900 homes in a big part of the University of California in Berkeley that day. Same day, 2 fires started in Sonoma County, one in Nuns Canyon near Glen Ellen. One started in Napa County in Calistoga and burned to Santa Rosa. Does that ring a bell? That happened in 2017. That same scenario happened in 1964. These fires repeat themselves. They repeat themselves because of the winds, the Diablo winds that are coming from the same place. They're coming from Salt Lake City. They come over the mountains. They follow terrain that's still here. The terrain, the topography is exactly the same today as it was in 1923. If you live in the path of a major wildfire that burned under Diablo wind conditions or Santa Ana wind conditions in Southern California, you need to follow every step on this. You need to follow every recommendation we make about defensible space around your homes and hardening your homes, because it's going to happen again. We have every reason to believe that that fire in 1923 is going to hit this community again at some point. Again, hopefully not in our lifetimes. These guys have been really good at stopping those fires for about the last 100 years. It's been like 96 years now. We're not going to get lucky like that forever. Fuel conditions, the vegetation around our communities is changing because we've been so successful at putting out fires. We are getting better and better at putting fires out. We have new aircraft that we fight fire with. These guys have new fire engines, new equipment, new radios that makes us more efficient. We can respond to fires faster. PG&E's helped us install high-definition video cameras on 4 different mountaintops in Marin that give us a 360-degree view with fire detection cameras of the whole county. Those things help. They're going to make it easier for us to put out a lot of the fires that start here. CAL FIRE, for the first time this year, has helicopters that can fly at night. We've never been able to fly aircraft to fight fires at night. Those things are all going to help, but at some point, the fire's going to start in the wrong place on the wrong conditions, and you can count on it impacting this community because you live in the path of one of those historic fires. So, evacuation. We're more than halfway through this discussion. Evacuation, your life, your personal safety is the most important thing, but I do want to talk about your homes, vegetation in the community, and then a little bit about how we organize.
So a question about evacuation. Back
Sure.
up to the campfire.
Yeah.
You mentioned the people got out of their cars, made a really bad mistake.
Yes.
What happened to them? Why was it a bad mistake? They didn't
Yeah.
die?
Yeah, no, well, some of them did die.
Oh,
Nobody died in their cars evacuating in Paradise. 9 people died while evacuating. 5 of those people were in a traffic accident in one intersection. They got out of their cars. I don't think it was a place where they could have survived. They were not on a paved road. I don't know how many of you know Paradise. It's a rural community. There were unpaved roads. They were on a forest road, on a gravel road. They got in an accident in an intersection. I'm sure the visibility was terrible, the conditions were awful. 5 people died in one intersection. The other 4 who died were all on dirt roads as well. They were either in their cars or adjacent to their cars, but they had all driven off of the road for one reason or the other. They had all driven into burning vegetation off of the road. In the one intersection where 5 people died, there was a car that was unburned, untouched. There's video footage of it, of a dog barking. The fire's out, the fire's passed over. There's a dog playing with a tennis ball in the back seat of a car that had been in the center of the dirt road. The cars that went off of the dirt road didn't make it, and neither did the people inside those cars. When the people abandoned their cars, that was on, the pictures you saw were on Pence Road near the Feather River Hospital. They got out of their cars, they ran for it on foot, they panicked in traffic. I can't say that I can imagine the anxiety they were feeling. I can't say that we wouldn't have reacted the same way. Those cars that you saw burned up didn't burn up for hours. The cars were abandoned in the road. The incident commander on the fire, the fire chief who was in charge of the whole fire at the time, happens to be our fire chief, your deputy fire chief in Ross Valley. Mark Brown's his name. He works in Woodacre. He was the incident commander on the campfire the morning it started. He goes all over the state. He was the incident commander on the Thomas Fire in Southern California. So I want to emphasize this because you have the best of the best protecting you. He made the decision to push those cars that had been abandoned off of the road using a bulldozer into the burning vegetation on both sides of the road so that the firefighters could access the Feather River Hospital and evacuate 30 people who were trapped there. Those cars burned hours after they were abandoned. They were pristine until they got pushed off of the road. That's what you didn't see in the media. That's a tough story to tell. It's not fake news. It's just a photograph that was taken, and we took those images and ran with it. If you look closely, this is what I want you to do. The next time you see those pictures, and they show up all the time now, you're going to see them on campaign mailers, I'm sure. You're going to see them on the front page of the Chronicle again. Look closely at the picture, and this is another piece of homework. Take a deep breath, look at that picture, and tell me what you see in the trees the next time you see the image. None of the trees burned. In that picture of burned up cars, the treetops are green and beautiful. The trees never burned. Those cars burned up when they were pushed into smoldering, burning vegetation, low burning vegetation on the side of the road. The treetops are fine. It was a survivable area. Everybody, had they stayed in their cars, would have been fine. Many people were burned when they got out of their cars and ran for it. We have every reason to think Sir Francis Drake Boulevard is a safe place for you to be in your car. Your car has an air filtration system, air conditioning, headlights, an AM/FM radio. You roll up your windows, you turn on the air circulation. This is the same thing you do when you drive near a dead skunk. Okay, that's what you do. Recirculate the air, turn on your AC, tune into a Bay Area news radio station. Take a deep breath, have a Zen moment, and you're going to be okay. You've made it to a great place. Have some concern about some of your neighbors who live at the top of Iron Springs Road. Say a little prayer for them. Have some concern about some of your neighbors who live at the end of Cascade Canyon, who live at the top of Scenic and Fairfax. If the fire's approaching them, they have a much different scenario. They still need to stay in their cars. They need to get any notion they have of evacuating on foot out of those neighborhoods out of their head. Your car provides a huge amount of protection to you. But you living where you do are in a fantastic place to evacuate. I have every reason to think that we're all going to make it out of the community just fine. Scared, but fine. Any other questions on evacuation?
Just
Barbara?
one, so is it an anecdote that people in Oakland Hills did die in this fire?
13 people died in the Oakland, 25 people died in the Oakland Hills fire. 13 of them died on Charing Cross Road. But we were fighting the fire at Bill Newton. My father in the back row and I were both there fighting that fire. Charing Cross Road was a narrow hillside street with a slope of eucalyptus trees below it. Eucalyptus trees, I'll talk about them in a second. They're not the end of the world, but this was an unmaintained grove of eucalyptus trees with a huge amount of dead vegetation that had fallen out of those trees and built up for decades on the ground. They were directly above that slope, mid-slope, firefighters recognize that mid-slope roads, roads that are halfway up a slope, are the most dangerous place to be during a wildfire. Those cars were there when power lines fell down across the road. A firefighter and a police officer died at the same place trying to clear the power lines down to make a path for these people to help them evacuate. It was a tragic, horrifying place to be. They were not on any kind of a road that looks anything like Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, nothing like Pence Road, even those pictures.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I mean,
We're
lucky, but I think
we're
the
lucky.
Cascade.
Yeah, so the Cascades, well, Cascade Drive itself is on the valley floor, not the worst place to be. Still want you get to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, the end of Pine Drive, top of Toyon, totally different scenario. They need to get to the bottom of the hill as quickly as possible. Fire travels uphill exponentially faster than it burns downhill, even with wind. The heat rises. If you're at the valley floor, the heat is all rising and going away from you. That's what you want. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be up the hillsides. Really important. Yeah. So there have been cases where people have been trapped in places in their cars, but never, you know, in my knowledge, on a wide road on a valley floor. So, yeah.
Years ago, when I was in San Francisco, doing the dirt training, we emphasized, and that was earthquake focused in a lot. Never let your car get below 150 gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always keep your car filled up.
This is doubly important this year. Has everybody heard about the PG&E public safety power shutoff that we should anticipate coming? PG&E's planning on shutting our power down during certain weather conditions. Red flag warning is the primary one. When they sense that there are strong winds that could impact power lines, either blow the power lines down, blow trees onto power lines, they're going to shut the power down. It's for our safety, ostensibly, it's to protect the electrical infrastructure, it's to prevent fires from being ignited by power lines. There are still lots of things that can start power lines. I'm personally extremely concerned about the possibility that 10,000 people in Marin drive to Harbor Freight Tools in Santa Fe and buy $99 generators manufactured overseas, and for the first time in their life are on the back of their redwood deck in Fairfax or up in the hills, starting up a gas-powered tool that they've never fired up before, pouring gasoline into hot gasoline engines on a red flag day to try to keep their food frozen in the freezer. That terrifies me. I think there are lots and lots of other things that can start fires. We know that. Cars driving in grass, the classic cigarette butt out the window. We had a fire start from somebody, one of the North Bay fires started from somebody driving a stake into the ground, a spark from a hammer on a stake. That's all it takes sometimes, especially when the conditions are dry and windy. So we can eliminate the power lines as a potential source of fires. Only about 10% of the fires in California are started by electrical infrastructure. So we're not eliminating the other 90% of the potential ignition sources for fires. Yeah. Right.
On red flag days, are there actions, isn't that kind of like you might, there's no alert, but there might something happen? So should you kind of go into referee prepping?
Yeah, I think you should. On a red flag day, double check this list. Go through it. It's not going to hurt you to do. 9 out of 10 things on this list you could do on any day at home. They're not particularly big preparations. Some little things. Opening the side gate on your house and propping it open. Where you've got a wooden gate, a wooden fence terminating in your house. This is how we're going to transition to talking about our houses. When you've got a wooden fence that terminates in the side of your house, everybody's got a fence, right? Most of our fences are made out of wood. It ends at your house, and most people have a gate there. If it's a wooden gate, that's a channel for fire to travel along the fence and burn right into your house. Even if you've got a house that's made from stucco or a relatively fire-resistant surface, that fence can burn right into your house and ignite your house. You're going to go through this checklist and you're going to see things like prop your gate open. We give a little explanation because I've had a lot of people scratch their head. We didn't tell people why before, they didn't understand why. That also gives Oscar, the fire captain, a chance when he's patrolling this neighborhood, driving up and down Glen Drive, driving through Mitchell, looking for any potential spot fires from the big fire. Gives him a chance to see down the sides of houses and into backyards to see if there's something burning in those backyards. If they see it, they can jump out of the fire engine, go over and put out the tiny spot fires. That's a big part of what fighting these big wildfires are. I won't give gets away. But oftentimes it's not the heroic scene with lots of water and huge wall of flames. It's a firefighter putting out a spot fire, sometimes with their canteen, a bottle of water, sometimes with the little kitchen sprayer that's above your sink. We've saved houses like that before. It doesn't take a lot of water. It takes seeing the spot fire when it's really tiny. Opening your gate gives him visibility. Lots of things like that. You've got who here has a jute fiber doormat? You know the natural fiber doormats? They usually say welcome on them. Have a little picture of an oak tree on them. Anybody have one of those? Yeah. Okay, so that's a bed of dry grass that you've got right at your front door. We've found over and over, I've got a folder full of pictures on my computers of houses where the house is no longer standing and there's a black charcoal rectangular mark on the front steps of that house. We can't say for sure in most of those cases whether that's what burned the house down, but I can tell you for sure that those jute doormats burned in every case. There's no reason for you to have that there. You shouldn't have a jute fiber doormat at your front doorstep during the summer if you choose to live in California. They're great in the wintertime, they keep your boots clean, they keep the mud off your boots, but in the summertime, put it inside, put it on a shelf in your garage, put a heavy rubber doormat at your front door instead. They're much harder to ignite during a fire. A heavy rubber doormat won't ignite from embers. The grass fibers will. Who's got a fireplace in their house? Anybody still use wood? Yeah, there are very few people burning wood now, but I see when we go out and do inspections, we find houses all the time that have got a little stack of wood. Our fireplaces are mostly for ambiance now. If you don't burn all of your wood during the winter and you have a small bundle of firewood on your front porch, you need to get rid of it. Put it in your green can and dispose of it, or move it if you have an option far away from your home, 30 feet from your home. Don't move it next to your neighbor's house. Move it 30 feet at least away from your home, or just get rid of it. Burn it all during the winter so you have none left on your doorstep during the summer.
Is that in print somewhere where we can give it to neighbors who have the
Yes, it's on this.
Great.
It's on this. So, yeah.
Yeah, so if we get a Marin alert saying evacuate the house now, not 2 hours now,
Yes.
should we be opening gates and everything, or should we just be going?
If you get an evacuation order where we're telling you to evacuate immediately, we want you to take care of yourself only. Take care of your family and truly dress head to toe the way I described. It's kind of like when the oxygen masks come down in an airplane. They say take care of yourself first before your kids. I see you've got kids here. You need to get yourself prepped, then your kids, then your pets, and leave. Pets are important. When I say take care of your pets, I mean it. Of the 79 people who died in Paradise, a number of them died trying to rescue their pets, going back into their houses for pets. The former fire chief in Kentfield, not this one, but the one before him, was one of the toughest old recent firefighters you've ever met. Really knew what he was doing. He's getting older, but he was eminently capable of getting himself out of his house. He stayed too long. Part of the reason he stayed was his dog. Almost lost him going for his dog. If you've got a pet, I have a lot of animals in my house. We have a plan to get them all out. I don't even like cats. I have a cat. I would risk my life to save my cat, mostly for my daughter. But truly, people will risk their lives for their pets. So we know that. You need to have, as part of your go kit, it's on this list. It's in here. You need to have a plan to get your pet out, and you can't develop that plan or try to catch your cat when your neighborhood's already on fire. So this is all to get to Joanne's question. You need to, at the first sign of a red flag warning, start thinking about how hard it's going to be to catch your cat if your neighborhood's on fire. Well, what I recommend, go on Amazon, search for the collapsible pet carriers. They make one for cats that's got a little annex. We actually have a picture of it on the Fire Safe Run website. The side zips open, gives the cat a little more room to stretch out, and it gives you room to put food and water in their carrier. And put the cat, as much as they may not like this, in the carrier, put them at your front door and make them wait it out. Potentially during a red flag warning, if you think that you might not be able to get your cat when you really need to. Certainly, if you get the evacuation warning message where now it's time to go through the checklist, Put your cat in the carrier. Put your dog on a leash. Get them ready, because you will not be able to find your cat. That cat will be so far under the couch, you're never gonna get it when you're panicked and it's really time to leave.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess what I mean is like the gates seem like a 60-second thing. It's going to take you 60
Sure.
seconds to do that. Is that something that we should do, or is
No,
like?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, what I don't want you to do is take this checklist and go out there with a magic marker.
Hold on,
Check
honey.
the items off.
Almost done.
But if you've done your homework tonight, and you've gone through this, and you understand some of the prep things, and you're evacuating, and you're going through that side gate, absolutely. Prop it open.
Okay.
The jute doormat, I'm hoping that you all go home tonight. Truly, go home tonight. We're in fire season right now. Go home tonight, put your jute doormat on a shelf in the garage. Put it away for the summer. Doesn't belong there. And part of that is just an exercise in learning that it can be simple little things that ignite your home. We're all concerned about vegetation. What I found, probably less so in this neighborhood, I feel kindred with you guys. I grew up in this neighborhood. There are certainly certain communities in Marin where everybody's worried about the vegetation, but they're primarily only worried about their neighbor's vegetation. You know, we don't worry too much about the weeds and the grass and the juniper in our front yard, but we're sure as heck worried about what's in our neighbor's yard. That's less of a risk to you than you think. It's not that it's not something that you'd have to deal with, but it's removing your vegetation, dealing with the plants in your backyard, certainly the plants that are growing up in the open space are going to have less of an impact on your home than things you can do right around the base of the walls. Your roof is the most vulnerable part of your house. If you don't have a spotlessly clean roof during the summer, embers are going to land on it, ignite vegetation, leaves, needles from trees, potentially ignite your roof. Hardly anybody, I don't think, well, there might be one or two houses left in this end of Fairfax that have wood-shake roofs on them. Does anybody have a wood-shake roof? Like, you know, I know that the condominiums don't, but so wood shingle roofs are really common. Wood shingles can last up to about 50 to 80 years on a roof. Really durable surface, really vulnerable to embers. They're the most combustible roof type there is, and when there's a fire, houses ignite primarily from these tiny floating embers that land. They drift almost like snow. They're carried by the wind. Pretty famously, in the campfire, those embers blew as far as 12 miles ahead of the fire and started new fires 12 miles from where the fire started. That's horrifying to think about. That's usually not the case. Most of the embers are going to come from an area fairly close to you, but they're little bits of burning vegetation. Tiny ones. They look like snowflakes, glowing snowflakes when you're out fighting these fires. That's what's going to ignite your house. They're going to land on anything they can find to ignite. If you've got anything in your yard that you could potentially put in your campfire and burn, that's a vulnerability. Most lush green plants with broad leaves on them are okay. We have a list in here, fire-resistant plants. It's the green section on the back side. This is a list of plants that we know of that are relatively fire-resistant. As long as they're alive and maintained and well irrigated, they're fire-resistant. Every one of these plants will burn if they're dead. Every one of these plants could potentially burn if they're not irrigated enough. You don't want to overwater these plants. You want to learn a little bit about gardening if you don't know. I realize some of you live in common areas where you might not be doing the maintenance. Keep your eyes out for plants that die. Sometimes a sprinkler head gets clogged. Plant dies because it's not getting enough water. That's a plant that needs to be removed. Yeah.
It would be great if you guys could coordinate with the water department
Yes.
and formulate a list. Because the ones they're putting on their list are the ones that are avoid under all circumstances on your list.
So to some extent, now the water district. This list was created in coordination with the water department.
Okay.
It was So this list was originally created by Fire Safe Marin in 1995, working with the University of California. It was updated in 2017 with the water district. We updated it with the water district to remove a few plants that were now known to be invasive The only plants that are on their list right now are 2 species of juniper that they still recommend. They're not recommending them, and there's an asterisk that says we don't recommend this if you live in the wildland-urban interface. But juniper, it's public enemy number 1 to firefighters. Juniper was strongly encouraged by the Water District in the late 1970s when we had a 5-year drought here. It's one of the most drought-tolerant bushes out there. It stays green even when it's close to death. It's probably the most flammable plant species we commonly see in California. It is native to some parts of California. It's not native to Marin. It's horrifying. We lost a firefighter in 2003. A Nevada firefighter died protecting a house during a wildfire when the juniper bushes along the front path erupted into flames. He and his partners were running towards the house to take shelter in the house. The first 3 people in line said they never even saw any fire in the junipers. He didn't make it to the house. They turned around and looked for their friend, Stephen Rucker. They found him burning to death on the front path of the house. It's horrifying. It's awful. It was the result of juniper in somebody's front yard. There's no excuse for us to have juniper. I know there's still some juniper scattered through the neighborhood. If you focus on one plant, if you make it one mission to change one thing in your front yard this year, focus on juniper. There's a whole list of fire-prone plants. There's about 30 plants on our list of fire-prone plants, fire hazardous plants we sometimes call them pyrophytic plants, which is a term that we made up and it's incorrect. We're trying not to use it anymore. Pyrophytic plant is a real term that describes plants that need fire to reproduce, not fires that explode into flames. Juniper, campus grass, those are the big fountain grasses with the fluffy leaves on top, fluffy flowers on top. Bamboo, cypress trees, conifers like Monterey pine, those are the worst offenders. Those are the plants that are most combustible. Juniper's the worst of the worst. Redwood trees are the only conifer that we still recommend to have in our landscaping. You gotta be careful with any tree. Any tree that drops leaves on your landscape, around your house, around the base of walls, or on your roof is potentially putting you at risk. So we don't recommend removing any tree. We are not telling you to remove a tree right now, with the exception of juniper, which is usually a shrub but can grow in a tree form. We're not telling you to remove trees. I'm going to repeat that one more time because after almost every one of these sessions, the fire chief gets a phone call who says, this guy Todd was talking last night and he told me I needed to remove every tree around my house. I've never said that. Let me repeat, you don't need to remove your trees. The trees are probably not going to burst into flames. The problem with the trees in our yards is what's dropping out of them. And it gets worse in September and October. When the leaves are falling, that's when fire season's usually at its worst. That's when we need to start worrying about what's on the ground, what's in our rain gutters, what's on our roof. Yeah.
Aren't there conifers along Glen Drive all the way to the end?
There's a row of Monterey pines that are growing on the side of Glen Drive all the way to the end. They're on school district property. They're dying. Monterey pines are affected by 2 diseases in Marin, pine pitch canker and bark beetles that are killing them quickly.
They're not a fire danger?
They are a fire danger, potentially. However, any tree, including those Monterey pines, can be maintained with only a handful of exceptions in a way that makes it more fire resistant. To make your trees more fire resistant, regardless of what species they are, but especially ones like Monterey pines, you need to limb them up 10 feet off the ground, okay? 10 feet is a rule of thumb. If you have an 11-foot tall tree, I don't want you to limb it up 10 feet off the ground, okay? If you have a short tree, we want you to limb it up 1/3 the height of the tree. Tall trees over 30 feet should be limbed up at least 10 feet off the ground. And that's, arborists use that rule of thumb every day with almost every tree species. 1/3 the height of the tree is fantastic. In nature, before we moved here, before the Europeans moved here, there were about 150,000 elk living in Marin. Those elk are 6 feet tall. They can stand on their hind legs. They can eat the limbs off of trees 10 feet off the ground, and they did. Fires, natural fires started by lightning, burned through here about every 7 to 12 years. These were low-moving, slow-moving fires because the ground is grazed by elk, not by goats. grazed by elk, and there had been another fire just 12 years earlier on average. Now we haven't had a fire here, a significant one, in almost 100 years. The elk are gone. We no longer have cows grazing in these hills like they did when I was growing up here. We had cows in the hills, some sheep. They're gone. Vegetation's growing in an unnatural way. We're relative risk. Around your house, I want to get to a point about the open space, but I really want to make sure we talk about the house. So the vegetation around your house, we're looking for dead vegetation. That's the worst offender. That can be twigs that fell out of a tree over the winter, might be leaves on the ground. It might be the grass that turns brown in the summertime, the annual grasses that we get around here that turn the hills brown. Those grasses are one of the primary carriers of wildfires. Grass fires are the most dangerous kind of fire for firefighters to fight because they spread so quickly and they change direction so quickly. We're really worried about grass fires. Grass fires can burn just about any day of the year. They can burn fast even on days when it's not a red flag warning. They burn faster on a red flag warning, but we can have grass fires anytime, usually from May until it rains again in the winter here in Marin. So keeping the grasses cut around your house. You're required by law, this law has been on the books since the 1960s, to maintain the vegetation around your house. We call it defensible space. Have you heard of defensible space? So you were required from 1960 until about 1998 to maintain 30 feet of defensible space around your home. After a series of fires, including the Oakland Hills fire, the state looked at it. The 30 feet had come from some science. There was a reason we came up with 30 feet. It had to do with the amount of heat the vegetation can put on a house. But we realized 100 feet of defensible space actually worked a lot better. Almost none of us have room on our property lines to build defensible space for 100 feet. The law does not require you to go onto your neighbor's property to create defensible space. It doesn't require you to make defensible space from your neighbors, but good neighbors do. So, this is important. A lot of you live in places or homes that back up to somebody else's property or open space. In some cases, like Canyon Village owns the property all the way to the hill, the ridge top. That's one place where, as property owners there, you are required to maintain 100 feet of defensible space. The fire department does not have a really good mechanism to enforce this law. It's really difficult for the fire department to enforce it. They have to go through a lengthy process that's time-consuming and expensive, requires attorneys, requires a warrant for us to go onto somebody's property and make them remove vegetation, while protected by the Fourth Amendment. And the government can't come on your property and take something from you, even if it's dry grass. So we have to get a warrant and a court order to remove vegetation from somebody after a 120-day process of notifications to the homeowner. So what I'm telling you is, don't get your hopes up that the fire department is going to come make your neighbor cut the grass in their yard. They're going to try. The fire department's doing more inspections this year in the Ross Valley than they ever have in the past. They'll be doing almost 8,000 inspections in the Ross Valley with a team of inspectors. Not just in the Ross Valley, in the Ross Valley and West Marin. Those inspections, they're legal notices telling you where you're in violation of the law, but there's not going to be a follow-up. These guys are not coming onto your property. Not that you were scared of them anyway, but they're not coming onto your property to force you to, in all likelihood, to cut your grass or remove your juniper bush. That doesn't mean that it's legal for you to have it there. The fire code does not allow you to have juniper bushes within 30 feet of your house. It doesn't say the word juniper anywhere in the fire code. It says that you cannot have combustible, pyrophytic, wrong word, it says it though, combustible pyrophytic vegetation within 30 feet of any structure, that includes outbuildings, or within 10 feet of any road. It says that in the fire code. I could find juniper in front of a lot of houses in this community. Shouldn't be there, never should have been there. Sorry that the water district has it on their list, and it's confusing, and I'm sorry that they encouraged you to plant it there in the 70s, but it really needs to go. That said, the structure itself is the most vulnerable part. So I would love for you to look at Fire Safe Marin's website. The first section, if you look at the inside of this fold-out brochure, this is in order of importance. The first section is the home itself, and everything within 5 feet of the home. That includes the firewood we already talked about, your jute doormat, the rooftop. The home itself is what you should focus the majority of your attention on. The next 30 feet, or really the next 25 feet, out to 30 feet from your walls, is what you should focus on next. That's the area that needs the most intense work. You really need to keep it clean. If you're not a good gardener, you might not be the right person to have a big garden if you're not capable of maintaining it. We don't think that you need to have bare earth. You can have a beautiful, lush, green garden and still be relatively fire safe. In fact, some homes that are well irrigated and have a nicely maintained garden are probably safer than plants that have less vegetation. You just got to take care of it. And if you're not capable of taking care of it, less is probably more for you. Less vegetation is probably better.
Just remind people that Fairfax is starting chipper days.
Yeah, so the town of Fairfax is one of the best communities in Marin with their Chipper Day program. They offer free chipper days, free disposal of vegetation, collection points.
Can you
to
tell
close-
us what chipper days mean?
So chipper days, you
yes.
bring all your,
You can bring green waste, big green waste. You can bring trees up to 8 inches in diameter if you can fit them in the back of your car. Down to a disposal point. Your disposal point is at the end of Olima Road, over by the library. They'll dispose of all the vegetation you can cut from your yard for you for free.
so just so you know, you can check the website for the dates. They're coming up in July. There's also a banner across St. Francis Drake. And so there are different areas that you can drop off the waste starting middle of July.
Yeah.
I always thought it was a Christmas tree disposal, and now I
No.
see.
Yeah, no, it's got more to do with fire hazard than
It has
anything,
nothing
yeah.
to do with.
We really want you to focus on plants that put you at risk, so I'd like you to look at the list on our website or right here of fire-prone plants and remove those. Yeah.
Also, you mentioned this earlier, but just for the Meadowland people here, we are gonna organize a chipper day for the community in September.
So Fire Safe Marin offers grants to communities that are involved in that Firewise USA program that I mentioned. We offer matching grants up to about $1,500 usually, although I'll tell you, it's been an active year. We're almost out of money this year, which is a good thing. We don't want to end the year with money in the bank. We offer grants to communities, a matching grant to help you host a chipper day or some other vegetation disposal project in the community. That's part of the Firewise community program that I talked about earlier. I'm going to continue to work with your boards and the community. Tonight was an education event for the community. Each year to participate in the Firewise USA program, you've got to hold at least one education event that everybody's invited to in the community. Doesn't matter if everybody shows up. We'd love it if we could pack the house with everybody. This was a good turnout tonight. And you need to hold one event that's focused on reducing the vegetation hazard around the community. That might be a work party, and in fact, I really recommend this. A work party that finds a resident in the community who's lived there for a long time. They probably took great care of their garden for the first 75 years they lived there. But everybody reaches a point where it just becomes too much. The best community building and safety building exercise I know of is you guys organizing a work party where the neighbors come out and help that person clean up their yard. Great effort that can make a huge impact. Remember I told you the average age of the people who died during the campfire. Several of the people who died were over 100 years old. Those people are neighbors of ours who really would have benefited from having someone check on them on their way out while they're evacuating. They would have benefited from a community work party to help them clean up their home. It can be a great thing that can potentially provide protection to the neighbors on either side of them and can reduce the risk that somebody dies in the community. We don't want that to happen. So, chipper days. Fairfax is holding two. The Meadowlands will be hosting a chipper day this year, partially funded by Fire Safe Marin. Yep.
Just want to say, along with being mayor, I'm part of Beachfront in Fairfax. And one of the things we're doing is trying to hook up don't think that necessarily applies here, Canyon Village in particular, but if you hear of things like that, we're looking for opportunities to hook up
Yeah,
kids to help older people.
that'd be great. So, yeah, a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of work that has to happen in the community. If you live on Chemron Court or on this side of Glen Drive, you don't have a lot of open space behind you. You do not have 100 feet between you and your neighbors of land that you need to maintain. I get calls from people all the time who say, well, the drawing in here doesn't apply to me. What am I supposed to do? My neighbor's 6 feet away. I say, that's fantastic. You only have 3 feet to clear. Think about what it's like to live when you back up to the open space and now you've got 100 feet to clear. And that brings me to what I said earlier. If you live adjacent to open space or you live adjacent to a neighbor who's got a big parcel and their vegetation is within 100 feet of your property, they're not required by law to cut that grass around your house or remove those trees. We need to work together. This is another part of this community building exercise. You've got to work with your neighbors. The open space district will allow you to go onto their property to cut the grass on their property, to limb up trees on their property if it's within 100 feet of your home and it's threatening your home. You're supposed to contact them. I think a mailer came out this week with instructions on how to do that to most people who border the open space. If you have a neighbor whose property you feel is threatening you, I will tell you right now, far more effective than calling the fire department is a bottle of wine and a frank discussion with your neighbor, a friendly discussion with them, and offer to help, maybe ask them to help. If they're not able to help or just unwilling, then the best thing to do is to take a deep breath and do it yourself. If you can't do anything on the property adjacent to your home, you don't need to lose sleep. You need to work harder on your home itself. That first 5 feet is critical and you're in control of that. You need to start thinking about other measures you can take to harden the home, following those instructions again at our website. We have detailed instructions on every feature on your home, from your roof, your rain gutters, your siding, your skylights and windows, your decks, the vents on your house. That's what this is. This is a wildfire ember resistant vent. This is on the shelf at Fairfax Lumber right now. Jackson's Hardware, Rafael Lumber, Home Depot, everybody's selling these things out. I mean, this is a hot item right now. There are 3 manufacturers in California that make vents that are designed to keep embers and heat and flames from going into the crawl spaces and attics of our houses. This particular vent is made by a company called Vulcan Vents. It's one of our favorite products on the market, but all 3 of the manufacturers are good. This is about $30. My house had 9 vents on it. It cost me just about $300 to retrofit every vent on my house with this. What my house had before I put these in was actually what you see on the back of this, which is a 1/4-inch wire mesh screen. It's a wire mesh screen with holes that are big enough you can just about put a pencil through the holes. It's made to keep rats out of your basement. It's made to keep birds out of your attic. It does nothing to stop embers from blowing into those spaces. And during wildfires, we've found over and over again that embers get into those spaces. They smolder, sometimes for hours or even days. Sometimes they find something like a cardboard box that's stored in your attic and they ignite it immediately, and your house actually burns from the inside out. Happens all the time during fires. This is an inexpensive, pretty easy way to retrofit your house to protect against that. Most houses have vents like this somewhere on the house. Houses need to breathe. Air needs to flow in and out to keep moisture from building up. Vulcan Vents makes a variety of different sizes to fit almost all the common vent sizes. They make kits so that you can cut them to fit custom vents if you have them. Really worthwhile upgrade. I can't recommend this enough. Even a huge house with tons of vents will probably be less than the cost of your insurance deductible to retrofit with these. A really good choice if you're going to start somewhere hardening your home. Things like the siding on your house, if you've got, I'll get you 1 second, the siding on your house, if you've got wood shingle siding, it's particularly vulnerable. It's not as bad as wood shingle roofing, because embers don't tend to land on the side of your shingles. But if your shingles are getting old, they're not cared for, they haven't been stained or treated recently, and they start to bend and warp and cup, embers can get wedged behind them and ignite. If a fire starts at the base of the wall from leaves that are built up at the base of the wall, it will climb up the wall, burning those shingles. In all likelihood, it's going to reach a vent that's up under your eaves, because most houses have vents under the eaves. The flames will go right through the vent into your attic space and burn your house down. If you have one of these vents, it could potentially buy you some extra time. Can't say your house is going to survive for sure if the siding of the house is on fire. But it does give some time for Oscar and Brian to get there and potentially find your house on fire and put the wall of the house out, which is a lot easier than putting out a fire inside the house. A lot more likely for them to be successful during a wildfire putting the outside of the house out. So this can buy you some critical time, or it might protect your whole house if it just keeps one ember from getting in. Worthwhile upgrade. Any questions about any of this stuff? Yeah.
I don't want to rush your presentation, I want to thank you very much for it, it was really, really good. And I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
So, in the notice about these meetings, maybe I didn't read it carefully enough, but I almost didn't come. We live, in Raleigh Court, Canyon, townhouse, and I thought the presentation was just gonna be about, clearing the space around,
Yeah.
which is irrelevant. What I found so useful, and I think everybody would, the neighbors I think didn't come because they thought the same as I did, was the evacuation.
Yeah.
I didn't know about getting in your car and heading up to
We can do
space,
this
and that was a
again.
safe place. I think more people would have
Yeah.
come had you put that out as a feature of this presentation.
So I'll tell you, in the past, we talked a lot about vegetation. When I started as a young firefighter, right after the Oakland Hill fire, just before the Oakland Hill fire, we focused on vegetation almost exclusively. That was all we talked about. And for years and years, and somehow it never really resonated with me that during the Oakland fire, while we were out fighting that fire, looking at house after house burn, we saved a few, watched thousands burn, I never saw any vegetation burn at all. All I saw was houses burning, and every house that we saw burn ignited somewhere on the house. Most of them ignited in the rain gutters from leaves that were in their rain gutters. This was in late October that fire started. It's taken, frankly, the fire service 30 years to really understand the science behind how houses ignite. It was our intuition initially that it had to do with the vegetation. Vegetation plays a role in these fires. They usually start in the vegetation and spread to houses. But once lots of houses get going, what matters more is how the house is built. And so what I find, we schedule something like this, the flyer goes out to your community, and usually the assumption is what we're gonna focus on is vegetation. We're not doing that anymore. Our first priority, just like theirs, is to talk to you about your safety. Our second priority is to talk to you about how to make your home more resistant to igniting. And our third priority is to talk about the vegetation. All three of those things have to happen for you and your home to survive, but they need to happen in that order. Yourself, your house, the actual building, and then the vegetation. And if you do things in that order, you've got a really good chance of getting away, and maybe after the big fire, coming home and finding your house still there. Any other questions? Sure.
I live on McKinney, and on one side is townhouses, and on the other side is open space. And I must say, even the goats had a hard time. They
Yeah.
could not get too far into it.
Yeah.
But I'd say about 10, 12 years ago, along McKinney, the homeowners association planted these, I forget the name of them, they're big bushes with bright flowers that poisonous.
Oleander. Yeah, oleander.
So we had these like
Yeah.
12-foot oleanders lining the base of the McKinney Drive, or those kind of things.
So oleander is actually pretty fire resistant. It's on the good list. We recommend it. Some people don't like it because it's poisonous. My answer is don't eat it.
I just wanted to know if it's.
Yeah, no, the goats don't eat it. They're smart enough not to eat it. So yeah, oleander's pretty fire resistant. Sometimes when it gets really old, it'll build up some dead material. It just needs to be pruned back. It grows and grows and grows. It needs to be maintained. It should be irrigated. It doesn't need a lot of water, hardly any, but a little bit of irrigation will help it during the summer, keep it a little more moist. It's a good choice. It's actually a really good plant. Provides privacy. One of the big concerns we have from people that has to do with bamboo. Bamboo was not on our list of fire-prone plants until about probably 8-10 years ago. We've seen over and over again bamboo burning. You can keep it irrigated, you can water it, it grows really fast. You can build a hedge with bamboo that's 30 feet tall, right? Most people plant it because they don't want to see their neighbors, or they don't want their neighbors to see into their house. It's a screen. People are really frustrated when we say you've got to remove your bamboo. Bamboo responds, it's a grass species, it responds really quickly to changes in the environment. So if the temperature goes up and the humidity goes down and we get a windy day, it takes about 10 hours for bamboo to respond and equalize with the environment. So it doesn't matter how much you've watered it, it doesn't matter how well irrigated it is. After about 10 hours of being exposed to hot, dry, windy weather, it's going to be dry enough to burn, and it burns hot. It's a grass. Sometimes it's a 30-foot tall grass. So you've got to think about alternates for screening and hedges if you've got bamboo. The beauty of it is there's a lot of good replacements for bamboo. I recommend probably every day I tell somebody to go look at English laurel. A lot of you already have English laurel. You may not even realize it. It's the classic English hedge. You can grow English laurel to be about 30 feet tall, or you can trim it as a 2-foot tall shrub. It stays green year round. It loses leaves, but very slowly. It doesn't drop them all in the fall. It never builds up dead woody material. Once it's established, it hardly needs any water. It needs a little bit of irrigation like the oleander, but not a lot. So it's drought tolerant. It's a great choice for hedges and screens, and it's a fantastic choice to replace bamboo where you've got it. It's one of the most fire-resistant plants we know of. Just doesn't burn. In fact, I think it has some benefits for fires because in places where I've seen hedges of English laurel, the embers seem to have caught in the English laurel. They fall to the ground in the English laurel. There's nothing there for the embers to burn, and some of those embers never reach the house. I saw that over and over again in the community of Fountain Grove in Santa Rosa. The community of Fountain Grove in Santa Rosa was built to be a fire-resistant community. It was built after the Oakland Hills fire, and they made the houses out of stucco. They put tile roofs on them, and they put, for the most part, pretty good choices of landscaping in their yards. There was hardly any juniper up there. Some juniper had been planted over the years, but when they first built the community, they didn't use juniper. They chose good fire-resistant plants, or the best ones we knew of at the time. There were about 2,000 homes in Fountain Grove, and about 2,000 homes burned to the ground during the Tubbs fire. Only 15 houses survived in the whole community. There were simple little vulnerabilities to those houses. In 1991, these vents didn't exist, and we didn't understand how important vents were into how houses ignite during wildfires. We'd seen the Oakland Hills fire, but all of the houses during that fire had burned to the ground, and nobody really understood, again, just like what I described a minute ago, exactly how those houses caught fire. It's taken us 30 years of good science, a lot of experiments to figure out that things like the vents make us vulnerable. Those houses had tile roofs, which was intuitive to the builders at the time that tile roofs can't ignite. But when they built those roofs, they cut a corner. Who's got a call?
We got a detail.
They built tile
Thanks.
roofs. And
Thanks.
The bird stop. Tile roofs have something called a bird stop that keeps birds from building nests under the tiles. In Fountain Grove, they didn't put bird stops in the ends of any of the tiles. Birds had, over 30 years, built lots of nests. They had packed those spaces with straw and dry grass and the things birds build nests out of. Lots of those houses ignited when embers blew up under the eaves, under the tiles themselves ignited the birds' nests. A huge vulnerability in that community was garage doors. When the power went out that night, the power went out just before the fire arrived. It was burning from Calistoga to Santa Rosa, burning power poles on its way. Most people in that community learned of the fire as it was approaching the community at 2 in the morning. They didn't get the message that came from Alert Sonoma, our counterpart in Sonoma. They didn't get the message because their phones were down. They had no power in their houses. The phones didn't ring. Some of the cell towers had already burned up, so the cell phone messages didn't reach them. They were asleep at 2 in the morning. The community woke up with their neighborhood already on fire. People went to evacuate. In that community, most people parked in their garages. It's an upscale community. Not a lot of people parked on the street. If you did park on the street, you probably had 2 cars, and the nicer one was in the garage, and that's the one people wanted to evacuate in. They went into their garage at 2 in the morning with the power out. How do you open your garage door when the power's out?
Pull the
Yep.
rope.
Everybody's seen there's a little red handle that's required on garage doors to release it. It can be really hard to operate that during the day. It's much harder at 2 in the morning when your car is parked underneath that handle and there's no light in your garage. And you're panicked because somebody just knocked on your door screaming that the neighborhood's on fire and you don't even know why. People went into their garages. If they were able to open the garage door, that was fantastic. They got out. Some people died in their garages. They weren't able to operate those latches. They never made it out of their garage. Some people did operate the latch. They got in their cars. They drove away. They're in relative safety. Nobody died in their cars evacuating the Tubbs fire. One person died while evacuating when they drove into a canyon. They lost sight of the road, went into the canyon, got out of their car in burning vegetation. But again, nobody died in their cars. You're okay. You drive out of your garage down to evacuate. If you can't shut your garage door behind you, you're not going to have the wherewithal to get out of your car, put it in park while your neighborhood's on fire, go back into your garage, close the door behind you, relatch the garage door in total darkness, and then go out your front door. You're probably not going to do that. That's what they would have needed to do to close their garage doors. A $99 battery backup. It's on the shelf at Home Depot right now. You can order it from Amazon. They make universal battery backups for garage doors. $99 will allow you to open your garage door, at least according to the packaging. You're looking at these things 200 times during a power outage. Most important thing I think is that it's going to let you turn your light on in your garage when it comes time to evacuate, so you can get in your car and leave. It'll keep the little light on the button on the wall illuminated through the whole power outage. That's important because when a wildfire is approaching, there's a better than even odds that the power's going to be out. We should expect that we're not going to have power during a wildfire. We should expect that PG&E is going to shut the power down multiple times this year, sometimes for up to 5 days during the summer. The reason it's going to take up to 5 days is that they are going to shut the power down when the strong winds are predicted, and they can't turn the power back on until they've visually inspected 6,000 miles of power lines in the north.
Jiminy Christmas.
So they don't know, when they shut the power lines down, they don't know if a tree's fallen on those power lines, and the only way for them to find out is to either turn the power back on and wait for a fire to start, or go and inspect all of the power lines. So they have to wait for the winds to pass and then inspect every inch of power lines. They have a plan in place that's going to use helicopters and drones and fleets of people on the ground driving, looking at power lines. But it takes a long time to inspect 6,000 miles of power lines.
Speaking of drones, are we gonna get to see the pictures you were taking before the goats started eating?
Yeah, when they're all done. You can see last year's pictures of the goats on Fire Safe Marin's website right now. firesafemarin.org/goats, and you can see what they did last year. It'll be more impressive this year. Yeah.
2 quick questions. One, is there more leverage? You said you can't control a neighbor and what they're doing with their property, but is there more leverage on public property like the Ross Valley School District, White Hill, the trees that you mentioned that are dying, the baseball field, basketball courts? They've got vegetation that they say they're going to take care of, but it's touching our fences. It's dry as all get out.
So White Hill School last year used goats to graze 11 acres around the campus. They did that in cooperation with county parks. They're doing it again this year. They grazed up to the neighbors' properties. County parks and county flood control district are going to be connecting their grazing this year. We're going to graze an additional 8 acres of grazing at the old Sunnyside property this year. We are grazing right up to people's fences. You have an opportunity to go to reach out to county parks and get permission to cut grass on their property. You may have to.
Okay.
They're making a pretty sincere effort to go above and beyond. They're doing 200 feet of defensible space at a minimum around White Hill School right now. This is the school district and county parks. The reason they're doing the 200 feet of grazing when defensible space is only required for 100 feet is we feel that we need to add extra cushion for that school. There are 700 to 800 students at the school during the day, and their parents cannot come to pick them up when an evacuation's been ordered. The fire department needs to shelter the kids in place safely at the school. We can't get all of the kids out if an evacuation order is given quickly or it's a fast-moving fire. So we have plans in place for White Hill School and San Domenico School, which are both at the end of a canyon. They're both in the path of that 1923 fire I talked about. They're both at risk, and they're going the extra mile or extra 100 feet, so to speak, to reduce vegetation. Whether you have any additional leverage, you do, especially with county parks, and that they have a system in place to give you permission to cut vegetation yourself. And they're making an effort to bring goats in to add defensible space around private property. They're not doing that everywhere, they're doing it in key locations. This is the second year we've been doing it. That came from a plan that we wrote at Fire Safe Marin called the Community Wildfire Protection Plan for the whole county. We encouraged it. They meet with us. They've been a part of our organization for 30 years. And this is the first time, 2018 and 2019, the first time they're going out with goats and clearing additional space around homes to help certain property owners do it. It's going to rotate. If they graze behind your house, which they probably, I think they will this year, I'm guessing I know where you live based on.
Yeah, Shamrock.
Yeah. So county parks will be doing some grazing in the neighborhood there. The school district will. It's not a guarantee they're going to do it every year. Our goal isn't to cut the grass and make your house safe this year. Our goal is to try to maintain those areas as grasslands, because you've probably seen, if you've lived here long enough like I have, you've seen a change in the environment. The lack of grazing, the cows all left in the late 80s here, and all the grasslands started to fill in with brush immediately, and we're losing grasslands. The grasslands, I told you, are a little more dangerous for the grass fires move fast, but they also are easier for us to fight fires in some ways. The airplanes and helicopters and fire engines are really effective there. So we're trying to encourage grasslands to remain around here. We don't want to fill in with brush.
I had a question. I had a two-part question, Matt. So I got redwood trees that just drop stuff on my house constantly, and for me to keep my roof clear, it would be like a daily chore of going up there. Is there anything are there special gutters that you would recommend for houses? What do I do?
I have an 80-foot tall valley oak tree over my house, and I clean my roof every day in the fall.
Oh, okay.
You may not be able to do that. It's a nightmare. I do it because in my lifetime I've been to fires that I've seen 50,000 houses burned in wildfires in my career. So I spend an hour a day. I take a deep breath. I kind of sing a song or something. I clean my roof. There are gutter guards. We recommend them. They're pretty good. You need to use a metal gutter guard. They make the stainless steel mesh gutter guards. You can get them at Home Depot. They go over your gutters. They can help you. The gutter guards are designed to keep leaves out of your gutters, because when you're standing under your roof, you can't tell if there's leaves in them, in the gutters usually. So the gutter guards help, but you still probably need to clean your roof off if stuff's falling on it. And all it takes is one handful of leaves in the valley of a roof or on top of that's a real vulnerability. To minimize that, you need to have a good roof. You need to make sure you have a fire-resistant roof. You probably do. Keep it as clean as you can. Focus on everything else around the house, and do your best to clean your roof. Don't wait until wintertime to clean your roof like a lot of people do. I'm telling people that most people used to schedule a roof and gutter cleaning just before it rained in November. And this goes to really almost especially for the condominiums. You should be thinking about scheduling your roof cleaning on June 1st, September 1st, and October 1st every year. at a minimum, and more as needed, rather than just one in November. I know the budget for cleaning roofs just quadrupled, but it's really important, it's critical. Not every roof needs to be cleaned. The other thing you can do is cut the trees back. Those redwood trees probably add a lot of value to your house, so I'm not saying that you should remove them. They're not a fire hazard.
They're like 300 feet tall.
They're a fire hazard for what falls out of them. But there are places. I removed 2 huge limbs on my oak tree, which reduced my workload a lot, but I still get a lot of leaves on my roof. I didn't have the heart to remove the whole tree. It's beautiful. And my live oak, or my valley oak tree, is one of the most fire-resistant trees on earth. It's 85 feet tall. There's no limbs within 40 feet of the ground. It's beautiful. I could hold a blowtorch to the tree, it'll never ignite. But I have 100 pounds of leaves on my roof every single day from October until December.
Matt, you had a question. You can go now.
I was wondering if the goat money, the goat budget,
Yeah.
is that extensive? I mean, could there be more efforts to, or are they on target?
Yeah, so the school district, it's kind of an experimentation. We asked them to commit to 5 years of goat grazing. It's gonna be a mix of goats and sheep, and they're committed to it. The county parks is looking at ways to expand this. It's expensive, so they did expand the budget this year. We did 250 acres of grazing last year. We're doing 500 acres of grazing this year.
So are there different agencies that are
Yeah.
pooling and
So
coming
this
together?
was what started by Fire Safe Marin and Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
A little wind.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District, but then the Ross Valley School District joined us. The Rocking H Ranch belongs to James Hetfield from Metallica. Skywalker Ranch, Triple C Ranch, San Domenico School, Canyon Village, Cascade Canyon, and the town of Fairfax, town of San Anselmo have all joined in. It started with originally was just Sleepy Hollow Fire District and Fire Safe Marin and county parks. So it's expanded dramatically. 500 acres of grazing will happen this year. I would expect that we'll do 1,000 acres next year, but at some point we're gonna reach kind of an equilibrium point.
So there's a point where it's enough.
Or the goats won't
You
eat
know,
anymore.
The goat grazing
They get
is
full.
a tool. It's like a tool in our toolbox. It's not the end of it's not a perfect solution.
Right.
The goats, for the most part, probably can't come back every year. We're gonna rotate sheep in. It'll probably be sheep that come back next year because they eat different things, and we wanna give some of the plants and trees some time to rest. The goats, you've seen, they climb up in the tree a little bit. That's good. They eat the lower limbs of the tree, but the trees also need a break from that. So we're gonna use goats and sheep and a mix of them, and we're learning how to do this. What we're doing right now is probably the most complicated goat grazing operation going on in California. Most goat grazing that's been used, and the Spanish TV station came out and interviewed us, and the whole gist of the interview was laughing at the silly Americans who just figured this out, right? They've been doing goat grazing forever. That's just how they manage vegetation. We're learning, but we're also not just raising pastures. Like farmers in the Central Valley use goats to help clean up the weeds after their crop is picked. Here we're creating fuel breaks that are tens of miles long. We'll have almost 20 miles of fuel breaks when we're done at the end of this year, and it requires intensive work. We have more goat herders than you normally have with the herd. That makes it more expensive. We move our fences every single night. They usually build one fence and leave the goats inside that fence for a week or two at a time. We're moving our fences every day. Really labor intensive. It's a great way to cut 500 acres of grass, and it's actually still cost effective. But we're not going to expand this to the point where we're using goats exclusively for this stuff in Marin. There's going to have to be a lot of different tools, a lot of different approaches, and short version, yes, you're going to see an expansion.
I mean, there's a
You'll
lot
see
of
more
land
goats.
up there.
Whether they graze in this exact spot you want them to, maybe not. The goats also, they need a mix of grass. I get phone calls every day from people who say, hey, I want to rent a couple of your goats for a few hours in my yard. That's not how it works. These are herds of 400 goats. We have 3 herds of 400 working right now. And they come, it's all or nothing, and you don't want 400 goats in your backyard. They'll eat the tires off of your car. I mean, they're serious. We get escapes.
Trust them, I know.
Who here helped round up the goats at Canyon Village last week? Yeah. So we get escapes. I caught an escapee the other day. I was coming up to see the goats in the morning and check on them almost every day, and I came up Glen Drive, and there was one goat standing on Glen Drive, staring at all of his friends on the other side of the fence. But we had to chase him. They call it a goat rodeo for a reason. We put him back in the fence. So, yeah, it's a great tool. People love it. We're thrilled with the results. So you're going to see more and more of it, but you're also going to see more machinery. You're going to see, hopefully, prescribed burning, where we actually go out and burn some of the vegetation. You're going to see a big expansion on this. We'll probably be looking, you may have heard rumors about this, but there's a really good chance that in March, you're going to see a ballot measure to form a new organization in Marin. All the fire departments in Marin will work together for the first time with an organization focused exclusively on wildfire prevention that would increase the number of fire crews who go out and cut vegetation around homes. Increase them. We have one fire crew in Marin right now. We'll increase that to at least 8 fire crews year-round, working 365 days a year to reduce vegetation. A lot of it, like in those areas, open space near your homes. You're going to see a fleet of fire inspectors, maybe as many as 60 fire inspectors for the county going out doing these inspections. We're going to do educational inspections for the first time, where we'll look at things like the vents on your house. There's no law that says that you have to have these vents unless you build a new home. But we would like to tell you that these vents exist, because we think most people don't even know that this is an option, and a lot of people would be willing to spend $300 to make their home safer right now. You need a professional to tell you that. We're going to do that, as well as tell you that you need to cut your grass if we see issues like that. And it will, the ballot measure will also help expand this kind of education program, so we can deliver many, many more of these and bring them to the neighborhoods more often.
You may have just touched on this, but do you have any resources available for the open space?
So that's not open space. Canyon Village owns 50 acres all the way to the top. So we don't have any resources for, what's that? 87? Yeah, yeah.
Some of it is MMWD.
Well, the MMWD owns about 1.5 acres around the water tank. It's not much. When we did graze around the tanks this year, so the entirety of the MMWD property was grazed. We're going to be pitching in a little bit with MMWD for that. Victory Village signed on. They paid for 2 days of grazing on their property. So we're trying to expand this all the time. You don't need to graze the entire 87 acres behind your property. The science shows that the vegetation farther than 200 feet from your house has almost no bearing on whether your house is going to burn or not. Usually, this is the point when somebody says, but you said that some of those fires started from 12 miles away, and that's true. But more often than not, vegetation more than 200 feet from your home has no bearing on whether it's going to burn. So at Canyon Village, what you need to do next is focus on the area that's already been grazed. We only went about 100 or a little more than 100 feet from the buildings with the grazing. That area is now left with dead stalks where the French broom was, where coyote brush was. There was a huge amount of dead vegetation, fallen trees, oak trees that had died from sudden oak death. Build up years of deferred maintenance there. What you need to focus on next, and I really recommend you do it now. We had hoped that this would happen last year, but I know there was a fire and all kinds of things happened last year. We need to figure out how to clean up that 100 feet. We need to cut all the dead stalks of the vegetation that the goats left behind. The goats eat about 2/3 of the weight of the vegetation. So what they've left behind is about 1/3 of the vegetation, and then the grasses all get turned into pellets and left on the ground as fertilizer. So the goats made it a lot easier for the crews to cut that stuff and haul it out of there, or chip it in place. They've removed, recycled most of the material, but you got to do the next step. All the dead wood that's on the ground needs to be knocked down. The trees need to be limbed up. How high?
10 feet or a third.
There you go. For that full 100 feet. That's the legal requirement. That's what's required by the California Fire Code and the Public Resources Code.
There's also
You're
tons of poison oak up in there.
Yeah, so the goats have thinned the poison oak out. They like it, but not that much. So they eat some of it. They make it a lot easier for the crews, for people, landscapers, to get in and remove the rest of the vegetation. Poison oak is the #1 workers' comp injury for landscapers and firefighters. So they make it a little easier to go in and clean stuff up, but there's still work that needs to be done. Really important that we cut the rest of that vegetation and clean it up. If we remove all that dead stuff, you're gonna see more grasses, more wildflowers grow in next year, and when the goats or probably the sheep come back next year, they're gonna move through way faster. They're gonna remove even more, and your hazard will be dramatically lower the following year. But there is still this sort of interim step that has to happen. The broom will not grow back. That was 10, 20 years of growth of broom that the goats killed for you. But they did leave those stalks. So that was probably 20, I lived here my whole life, that was probably close to 50 years of vegetation buildup on the ground. Yeah.
This has been great. Is it okay? I've been recording the whole thing. Can I post this to a private YouTube link for the community?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
Send me the link, that'd be great.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a very professional video, but yeah.
That's okay.
Good job, man.
Yeah. All right, thanks everybody for staying. We went a lot